Foundations of the West, here live on the Roper stage in the Roper Cowboy Marketplace. I am joined by three incredible lady silversmiths on stage today. I'm going to start by introducing them and telling you all their business names, and then we'll get a little bit into your roots, each of you. First, here to my right is Miss Corsi Donovan of Buckwild Bohemian. We've got Katie Kirshner of Kirshner Custom Silver, and we've got Miss Jill Latno of the Classy Trailer. Y'all give them a hand. So Jill, we'll start with you. Tell us just a little bit about your roots to the Western industry and where your background comes from.
So I never get a microphone, and unfortunately my voice is a little gone right now, but I'm originally born and raised in California, Northern California, actually Napa area. I grew up with pleasure horses, switched over to reiners, and also spent a lot of time with some club cabs. So I stayed kind of in the agricultural industry throughout for a while. I actually did not do anything ag-related in college. I ended up going into biochemistry, didn't finish that, and then ended up just working off of the racetracks and doing large animal repro for a while. So that's how I got here.
Katie, what about you?
My family is from a very small town in southeastern Oregon, and we run a cow-calf operation. They are still there doing that. I have a few head that they mainly take care of. So I still have roots to the ranching industry and ag, and then I also currently still work in the industry for Natural Resource Conservation Service. So
very cool, very well-rounded as well. And Corsi, what about you?
So my family actually, we started, we do farming. So we farm wheat, and then somewhere along the way we picked up cotton, and as well we raise, breed, and train cutting horses. And that's just been, my whole life, the farm, and I've constantly been on and off kind of working with my dad, alongside him, for him, with him. I would go to all his cuttings with him. I never really got into cutting myself. I dabble a little bit in rodeo here and there, still love, the art of the barrel race, but now we have sheep, and I currently have taken on the project of being a ewe mom. So I've got 3 little babies right now at home that are being bottle fed, and so it's great to have ties still to my agricultural and livestock roots.
So you're a ewe mom and a new mom.
That is correct. I have a 16-month-old at home as well, and he's my little helper.
That's awesome. Obviously, some really talented and, like I said, well-rounded ladies here. I want to hand the mics down the line as well and let y'all talk a little bit about how each of you got your start in silversmithing. Maybe who inspired you to do that, and where do you find inspiration from for your work? And we'll get into further details after that, but where do you find your inspiration, and how'd y'all get started in silversmithing?
Originally, Buckwild Bohemian was strictly vintage. I would travel around the country, and I would source and sort through vintage, and I would put it, on my website, and I would just buy, sell, and trade the art of other makers. And whenever the pandemic hit, I was about 5 months pregnant, and I was actually separated from my husband at the time because of border closures. He's from Ireland, and I was just kind of in this pickle where I was like, well, I can't go anywhere, can't buy any vintage jewelry, so I'm going to have to come up with something very quick. And what inspires me is not being poor. I mean, honestly, I've got a family to take care of. Grateful J Jewelry, Jesse Grego, he was actually kind enough to teach me. I spent 2 whole days in his shop. That was it. From there, I just kind of took what he taught me and ran with it, and I melted an awful lot of silver. But I had to do something. I was 5 months pregnant. I wasn't able to do what I was used to doing. And as much as I loved vintage, I fell in love with silversmithing immediately, even though I thought it was going to be something temporary. So the style I go for, I still want my stuff to look like it's vintage. I don't really use a lot of the shine and glitter and stuff like that a lot of people put on, finishing pieces, because I want it to look like it's, like it's got a story to tell. So, but yeah, that's the story of Buckwild Bohemian, and I still do a little bit of the vintage. I love it, but the silversmithing is definitely just in acceleration mode.
Kirshner Custom Silver started about 11 years ago now. My family is really big on having a second source of income. You know, anybody who's ranchers or farmers or that sort of thing know that your paycheck comes a couple times a year. And how you make do the rest of the year, you do odd and end jobs, you do whatever it can to make ends meet. And so we were raised that way. My parents always had something else, and so they raised us girls that way too, that we had another way to bring in money when times were tough, like when COVID hit. You know, it was another form of money. I was thankful to still have my job, but so it really blossomed out of that and started as a hobby, which I was really bad at for a really long time. And then I got in with Amy Raymond and Jill, and they really helped teach me a lot of different things about engraving and fabricating, and just finding that group of women and some men silversmiths too who will help you improve your trade. And inspiration, you know, I want the women that wear my pieces, what I build is legacy pieces. I want them to be passed down. I want them to be reminders of their family, of their ranch legacy, things like that. And so, you know, their passion for ag and mine is my inspiration for that.
So mine didn't, sorry, my voice is really terrible today. Mine didn't come out of the same sort of necessity that these two girls had. I had a science background, and I worked in vet med for a really long time, and I really enjoyed it. However, a lot of the places I lived actually outside in Ione, California, and there's not a lot to do out there, so I ended up beading. And then I kind of put that on the back burner. It was kind of just for fun, just instead of watching TV or doing anything like that. And after that, I moved back home and back to Napa, and I was back in the hospital setting. And then after I had my son, I was going stir crazy at home because I used to work night shifts, and now I'm at home with a newborn. So I thought, oh, I'll just start making jewelry again. And then it kind of spiraled from there, and along the lines, I picked up engraving, and now I'm teaching.
So let's talk a little bit about your teaching.
Okay.
You do a lot of work with the Pendleton Cattle Barons and then also the Art of the Cowgirl. Talk about Pendleton first, and then we'll talk about Art of the Cowgirl and what that fellowship program looks like.
Okay, perfect. Actually, hope you guys have a long time because I love talking about organizations like this. Amy Raymond actually is also another silversmith. You heard Katie just mention her briefly. I've had the pleasure of working with her as well. We actually teach together now. Amy and her family are well versed in Pendleton Cattle Barons, and I hope I do them justice, but they've picked me up along the way, and I started teaching fabrication classes for them. They host, it's a wonderful, wonderful program. Pendleton Cattle Barons is the first weekend in May. It is something for everyone. They've got makers, they've got, contestants, there is a horse sale, a dog sale, they've got classes, leather classes, anything that you could possibly want to do or learn, they have. All the proceeds go back to scholarships for ag-based youth. So I teach fabrication classes, and actually, very long story short, I started making Amy teach with me. She reached out and asked if I would teach fabrication, and I said, no, I don't teach. And this was a few years back, and I said, I do not teach, I'm a hermit. And she kind of laughed at me, and I said, okay, fine, we'll do like 10, 12 students, and you help. Well, it went so well having the two different silversmiths mesh together that we've just continued on. Our next class openings actually for Cattle Barons will open in January 1st, along with the rest of it. And if you guys want to follow along, they're on Facebook and Instagram, and I can give you links. Art of the Cowgirl has also been another wonderful organization. Tammy Pate puts on a beautiful, beautiful job. The main, effect of it is that they are helping women succeed in a Western-based industry. So they cover anything: makers, artists, gear people, horsemen, your dog ladies. They do a really well job. She has a ton of makers at her disposal, and we all love to work. And we do classes. There's a bunch of classes that are coming up. A lot of them are full, but there's still very many that you can enter. But it's wonderful to kind of work with other women in the industry. And it doesn't matter if, for like our silver class, it doesn't matter if you are a silversmith or a hobbyist or have never touched silver before or are new to the Western industry. We can pretty much welcome everybody. We've had anybody from newbies to well-versed makers.
And Art of the Cowgirl is an incredible program for their fellowship-based methods, and you actually had a fellowship in the last year. Please talk a little bit about that.
So I'm actually kind of a unique story for Art of the Cowgirl, but I think it was a really good opportunity to tell. The main basis of Art of the Cowgirl is that they have a fellowship program. So every year there is a new master, or whatever the master will be for the year. So Amy Raymond was the master silversmith for the second time this last year for 2021. The fellowship program, it opens up and it opens doors for women to not necessarily start, but also continue in whatever trade that they are in. So you have horsemen, they've had cutting horse masters, boot makers, saddle makers, a lot of these trades that are more not necessarily geared towards men, but traditionally men's trades, and that you have women doing. So it's more women helping women, and it doesn't really matter. The fellowships are open to anybody. So I was the 2021 fellowship recipient for silversmithing and actually had the opportunity to build my first bit. So it's a great program. If you are looking into any trades or currently do any trades, it's definitely worth applying for.
And I was able to follow along with what you were doing when you were building that bit, and it's fine. Just play it off. Earring came out, no problems. But talk a little bit about the bit that you were able to make, because it was really, really beautiful.
So being a teacher for Art of the Cowgirl and the program itself, and then also being a fellowship recipient, we had the opportunity to kind of pick what gear we did. It opened up a few new doors. It showed our students that it doesn't matter if you're also teaching, you can always learn. I asked Amy if she wanted to go ahead and build a bit with me, and she was kind enough to say, of course we can build a bit. So we built a bit in 5 days, or about 4.5 days, and I had no fingerprints left at the end from all the filing. I chose to do a Las Cruces bit. A lot of that came from the fact that it's more of a California-style bit, and I'm from California, and I know I should stop telling everybody that, but I'm really proud of it. And then I chose to do a modified spoon port. So it's going to be a good using bit for me, and it was a good learning experience.
And probably now one of your favorite personal pieces in your collection.
It sits right below my TV on my shelf, and I can't use it yet because it has to go to Art of the Cowgirl in January, and then it'll also go to Cattle Barons, Pendleton Cattle Barons for their gear show. But it will go on my paint.
Oh, that's awesome. That's super cool. And as we mentioned, 2 really incredible programs for people to look into, especially if they're interested in silversmithing. This next question is open to all 3 of you, because I'm sure we'll get a little bit of advice from each of you. What would you say to women who are looking to get into silversmithing? What's one piece of advice or some encouraging words that you could give them? Corsi, I'll start with you.
This is a question I get in my direct messages almost daily. I think a lot of people in general who want to start silversmithing, I think they think it's just like kind of like, you can just go to Hobby Lobby and buy what you need and come home. No, it's I would say you gotta really, really have a passion for it, and if you don't love it, you're not gonna want to stick with it. So I would definitely, say to the women who are interested in, learning about silversmithing or becoming a silversmith, start with cheap metal, copper or nickel, because that price of silver is not, it's on a downward trajectory, but it's not been kind through COVID. And, get connections. Don't just ask somebody, hey, what do I do? Or, you know, you got to build relationships. You got to network with people. You don't ever just want to come up to somebody and say, hey, what do you use for this? What do you do for this? That's, you know, because there's a lot of what goes into your work is just the time it takes to educate yourself. And, you know, if you come up to somebody and just say, hey, how did you become successful? It seemed like it was overnight. Well, it's not, you know. Nobody really showcases all the horrible pieces they make, but I swear to God, I have a pile of just uninspiring, just for the burn bin stuff. And there's been days where I've just been like, oh my God, I'm just going to sell everything I have and just move on with my life and get, you know, a marketing job or whatever. But, you know, you have to stick with it. You have to, you know, understand that there's going to be bad days. You have to get yourself a girl gang and, you know, find those people that are going to give you those words of encouragement. Start small and go from there.
Katie, what about you?
My biggest advice is invest in yourself. I took an initial class, and I always say I self-struggled. I wasn't self-taught. I self-struggled. And when I finally started investing back into myself and into my business, that's when it really grew. You have to take those classes. You have to, you know, work on silver because it is different, you know, especially if you're engraving. It's different than engraving on copper. And just invest in your business because it's the best thing and the return on it is always good. If you don't invest in yourself, you don't have enough faith in your own business and yourself to keep it going. So don't be self-taught. Like, just that's great. Start out that way, but you will excel if you find some classes, and they're all over. Individuals offer them, you know, in whatever avenue you want to go into. So invest.
Investing in yourself and then building the community as well along the way, both critical elements. Jill, again, that building a community seems to be a consistent theme, and again, something that we talked about a moment ago, but what other advice could you give?
So to go hand in hand with both of their advice, something that we tell our students is do what you can with what you have. There is no shame in not having the most expensive tools. There's no shame in asking for help. I think that off of what Corsi was saying, a lot of discourse that follows through with things that we are seeing, as we've all noticed that the community is growing and growing and growing at a rapid pace. And we have this issue where we don't talk about it because it's a hard issue to talk about with your newcomers. And it's easy to be frustrated when people are saying, well, how did you do that? I'm gonna make that and I'm gonna do this. And it's something that I struggled with as well. I've been a silversmith for a really long time, and it's something that I had to learn by teaching, that most of these students and most of these girls and most of these newcomers, they don't know where to start. They don't know how to ask. They don't know how to get involved. And as an industry ourselves, the best thing we can do is to reach out a lending hand and kind of teach them and show them the path and put them on the right path. So it is hard because you want them to reach out, and I want my newcomers to reach out, and I want our silversmith students to reach out. But we also, as silversmiths who do it for a living, we need to kind of step back and remember those things. So, but like Corsi said, you got to do it, and you've got to build up a community, and you've got to reach out. So the best thing that we can do is to help them reach out, but as a newbie, just start with what you can, with what you have. And to base off of Katie's thing, yeah, being self-taught is really hard. I started actually self-taught only because it was literally because of necessity. It was not by choice. I would have loved to go do classes. It wasn't feasible for me. I couldn't afford to go. I couldn't leave for that long. I couldn't do this. There's all these, I couldn't. But I'm still working on it, and I'm still planning on going to classes, even though I'm teaching them now. But we go see, go sit in people's shops, go visit, go watch somebody work, bring them lunch and sit there, ask questions, find new people, take classes, find community projects, anything like that. Just go do.
And I think it's interesting, something that you said earlier about even the teachers have something to learn. So focusing on the fact that not anybody knows everything at any point is key as well, I think. So talking a little bit about when people first start out, I'd love to hear from y'all. What were some of the first challenging pieces that made you want to pull your hair out when you guys first started learning? And what are some of maybe the most rewarding or sentimental that y'all have been able to create for people through the years? I know, tough question. Sorry.
It's me again. So I think it's fair to say that all of the first pieces suck. They are hard. They are heartbreaking. They make you feel like you can't. They tell you all of these lies, and you look at them and you're like, okay, this might not be for me. But it's just learning. And like Katie was talking about the metal and Corsi was talking about it. So pretty much all of my first pieces are pretty terrible. I've gotten rid of the majority of them. I keep a couple around. But
Just to keep yourself humble.
well, Amy stole one and wears it proudly in front of people, and it is hideous. It's real bad. It's a 3-stone ring that I wish would go in the garbage. So just like Corsi said, there's things that you wish would go away, but they do make you who you are, and it's kind of nice to gauge how far you've come. As far as the most sentimental pieces or the most favorite things I've built, I got to work on a cool clutch, and I did some conchos with Allie Falcon for Cowboys and Indians, so that will always be special to me. The bit, and then I built my first set of spurs in 2020. So I built an actual set of using spurs, and they're never gonna leave.
I feel like there's a special sentiment also for those of us who were raised around the ag industry when you get to build something that is meant for using, not anything against like the beautiful display pieces, but when you get to build something that you know is going to be there for possibly generations and get to work and take part of that cowboy culture that I know we all hold so dear, that's got to have some kind of special place in your heart.
Yes, cowboy gear in itself that can be passed on, or seeing people purchase something that is very expensive and they don't get to buy a lot of, that's sentimental, that they get to use every day. I mean, you can't beat it.
Katie, what about you?
Well, like so many of us, I did start with nickel for a long time because I couldn't afford silver, and I wasn't good enough to feel like I could charge the prices for silver. So I worked with nickel for years and literally hated myself and hated the work. And, you know, it is one of those things now. I see my pieces and people still religiously wear them and rock them, and I am like, please put that away and don't wear that in public and don't tell people where you got that because it's bad. But, you know, that's also the really neat part is this is 11 years in the making, and I am not one of those people who picked it up automatically. So there are some really trash pieces out there, and I can say I've invested in myself and came full course that now I'm happy with the work that I'm turning out. I had a bracelet that sat on my bench for 5 years, half made, because I could not get it to the solder to flow. It wouldn't work. It frustrated me beyond belief. And Amy and Jill came to my shop after I moved, and it's just like sitting there on my bench, like, just think about what you did, you piece of trash, because I just can't. And Jill is a big chunk of silver, you know, so I can't throw it away. Like, that's a lot of money sitting there. And Jill was like, well, why don't you just cut that beaded edge out and then just like make it have this cool scallop edge that goes with the engraving? So I actually salvaged it, made it into a beautiful custom piece for the gal, and so that was really frustrating and rewarding all at the same time, but also that, you know, having another eye to come look at things, go, well, why didn't I think of that when it's been sitting there for 5 years? Like, just cut that off. Oh yeah, okay, well, that was easy. I had it finished in 2 days.
Sometimes you just need the right spark of creative inspiration, and again, that goes back to one of our talking points today, building a community of makers who you trust the input of. Right there is a perfect example. Corsi, what about you? Some of the first pieces, I read somewhere in discussions leading up to this that you were very bad at the start, which I think is also a common theme, but something about using plumbing solder or what were some of the most challenging pieces when you first started, and then maybe something that has been most sentimental to you now?
Yes, Mackenzie, I used plumbing solder. Okay, now that that's out of the way, no. Yeah, so I was exceptionally terrible whenever I started, and I had the audacity to like, I made something and it was like the suckage was like semi-suckage, wasn't horrible I thought, and I was like so proud of it, and I was like, oh my god, and I sent a picture of it to Jesse, and he was like, what is that? And I was just like, this is it's so bad, isn't it? Like I just had to. I mean, you have to have a sense of humor whenever you're starting out too, because I mean, I don't know how some of these people did. Like, they just started silversmithing and then they chuck out these pieces that are like better than anything I could have done. Now I've only been at it for 2 years, but my first pieces in general were absolutely just horrifying, and my mom was like, "Oh my God, this is so good," and it's just it's just like. It's not the criticism that you need, It's like, Mom, just please don't wear that in public. Just you can keep it if you want, but please don't tell anybody who made that. Tell them you got it in one of those little 25-cent like quarter things. But I was kind of a dum-dum whenever I started finding my footing in my trade, because I started working with moons. Like, people kind of know me as like the person who does the big moon updates whenever I can get the stones, and those edges are extremely hard to work with. So I broke, I don't know how many stones. I burnt so much silver. This is post plumbing solder. And I was still struggling with, just finding my footing. And to this day, I would say, like, my moons are what I'm most proud of. There's not like one particular piece. I've always said, like, I need to just keep one for myself at some point, but I never do. And then I kind of got bored with doing those, so I started branching out and making little, I like making chains, and I started making like najas and just different stuff to kind of keep the creativity wheel flowing. But as far as like any particular piece I've made, it would be really hard to tell. Probably this ring is one of my favorite pieces I've ever made, and it is like the one thing I've yet to part ways with. So, but yeah, I'm just constantly proud of myself for coming so far, and constantly reminded of how much I have to learn still.
It's important to stay humble. That's okay. I think we can all admit that. In a minute, I'll probably fall walking down these steps. So that's my version of please don't wear the terrible things, is please don't watch me exit the stage. I actually want to go back to Katie for a second, because I skipped right over the part where I wanted you to talk about your squash blossom. Since we're talking about notable pieces here today, tell us the story behind that and what the creative process was like.
Killer. It was a lot. I actually was looking back through my sketchbooks, and I don't sketch often. I get an idea, I'll maybe do a small sketch, but I don't sit down and sketch stuff out. So the end of 2020, I think I started some sketches and some different ideas for building a squash. It was something I'd wanted to do, and I have several, love them. I love all the different types, but I wanted to make one that was just silver with a small little piece of turquoise like this and fully engraved. So I made it piece by piece, so each blossom, I did one. I made one to begin with, like, okay, this is the test run, see how this is gonna go, attaching the backs and the actual petals on there. So I cut out all the petals, engraved them, formed them. So it is 100% handmade, except for the beads. I ran out of patience and time, and I said I'm not making all those beads. But yeah, it's fully engraved by me, and it was a labor of love for sure. I did a lot of it based on, I have one from the 1960s, and so I referenced how the back and how the chain was on that one. So, I wanted it to hang a certain way and to feel a certain way when you wear them. And so yeah, it hasn't sold yet. I'm not sad about it. Yeah, it's getting its grand debut down here, and its name is the Wicked Felina. I name all my pieces. Yeah, so it was just a lot of fun and challenging and rewarding all at the same time.
And it's really cool, and I think you'll all agree with this in one way or the other, taking that back to finding inspiration in pieces. We're all rooted in Western culture one way or another, and something like creating a squash blossom, kind of cherishing the heritage of the Native American artists as well, is something that's very heavily influenced the silversmithing community, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, I modeled this off of an authentic 1960s squash blossom. So, it's definitely, there's influence from all over. You can just gather inspiration from everywhere and put, that's what I wanted to do. Gather inspiration, do my own twist, make it me. Because that's what sets my pieces apart from other people's is my engraving style, the way I lay things out, and that's my style. I wanted to put my spin on it.
And I think that's important and something that I've seen all of you talk about in posts on social media and things like that in the past is cherishing the traditions and finding influence in other designers and their styles, but then always putting your own spin on things. And kind of taking that to the side of, we all know how important it is to preserve the cowboy way of life and the cowboy and cowgirl culture, and of course, silversmithing has been a huge part of that for generations. I'd like to ask each of you what your thoughts are on how we might be able to continue preserving that heritage and those traditions so that future generations can see the importance of doing so.
I think education is a huge thing. When I first started 10 years ago, I hate to say it, but men did not want to teach me. They didn't. The only reason I was taught is the guy that taught me needed the money. And, he needed the money and he took me in for a week. There are several local silversmiths. I have had one offer to come sit down in any of their shops. And so that is not preserving our heritage. They are bit and spur makers. They have skills beyond belief, and they don't want to pass those skills on, and heaven forbid, pass those skills on to a woman. We are preserving the Western way of lifestyle. This is a tradition that needs to be upheld, especially someone who wants to get into Western engraving or just have a passion for doing leather work or anything like this. Wanting to educate people as they come up and be willing to help just, to keep it alive. And whether that's in ranching or silversmithing or you name it, you have to be willing to ask for help and to also give help when asked, because that's the only way we're ever going to learn and grow.
Jill, do you want to add to that?
Do you want me to? One of the reasons why Amy and I teach the way we do is because we've seen both sides. We've seen the side where you don't necessarily not want to help somebody. Inherently, everybody's a good person, and you want to help people, and you want to see them flourish, and you want to see them grow. Nobody tells you about the part where you create something and you're so invested in it that it feels crushing when anything happens. The only way that I got over that in this industry was that I realized that there are a lot of people that don't want to see people succeed, but it's not necessarily that they don't want to see them succeed. They sit on both sides. You have the people who want to help and everybody wants to learn, and then you have the people who don't want to teach because they feel like nobody taught them, because we're not teaching anybody, and it's not beneficial to anybody. As far as preserving something that's so traditional, there is a spot for the Good Old Boys Club, because that is traditional cowboy. We're women. We don't necessarily fit that mold. There are ways that we can learn and we can preserve and we can teach and we can be involved and keep it traditional cowboy, while still celebrating our Western heritage and celebrating the fact that we are not men and we are in a men's world. I think that it's a fine line that now that we are in 2021, pushing into 2022, I think in the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot more makers together. I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot more silversmiths, traditional cowboys, everything like that starting to mesh. We live in a world where social media is a huge thing. And it's also a world where we're watching the other generations that don't necessarily teach or promote, or everything is so hush-hush, but they're learning. We're having all these people learn about social media. I mean, we've got cowboys that don't have, there are some of you out there that do not have flip phones. I am proud of you. there's iPhones being used. Everybody knows the one person that they have that refuses to get rid of their flip phone and doesn't want to learn. And I mean, we're pushing everybody into a new century, and traditional arts need to stay traditional, and I really believe that. I believe that we need to have them traditional. I believe in cowboy gear. I believe in the Good Old Boys Club. I also believe in women succeeding. I work for many organizations that do the same thing. The best way that we can do it is all very carefully. You've got to find this fine line where we're talking and we're being more open and we're preserving it correctly as we're all sharing how to get to the same spot.
And see, this is why I keep asking you, every time you say, are you sure that I want you to answer? Yes, I want you to answer. And I think everybody here who's listening would agree. All three of you are incredible powerhouses. Corsi, is there something that you'd like to add to that?
I mean, absolutely. Especially with the way things have been, so wonky whenever COVID happened and so many small businesses shut down. I kind of was thinking along the lines of I have a love-hate relationship with new technology, but I was so thankful that I was online for that, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't one of the brick and mortars that got shut down, thank God, but I think it's extremely important that we pass down these traditions. And I mean, whenever my son's old enough and, whatever other little kids may come along in the future, I would absolutely love nothing more than to teach him what I do. And that goes for all things ranch, farm and ranch. That goes for all things silversmithing. That goes for all things sports. And his dad's an incredible athlete. I think it's really important that we nurture and educate and advocate for the younger generations, because they're going to be the ones that that kind of, I guess, break whatever mold that we've kind of put them in. You know what I mean? So it's really important to, I would say, hyper-focus on the younger generations. And I've taught my husband, I've taught my brother, I've taught several people that are close to me how to do it. And sometimes they love it, and then sometimes it's like, oh my God, I don't know how you do this. They get a headache after the first, hour in the shop, all the particles and dust and fumes. But with all things that are worth preserving, I would say trades of all kind, not just silversmithing, trades of any kind. If you build anything with your hands, it is paramount that you pass that down to somebody. And I completely agree with Jill. There will be, an acceleration of women, I think, in this trade, in this community, as well as like lapidaries. And it's a good feeling, because nobody wants to feel like they're isolated, that they can't ask a man, for help or anything like that. I'm very, very blessed. I've gotten some great advice from people like Jesse and Nick Cunningham and Tanner Crow, all of which have been more than helpful to me. Just whenever I had like stupid questions about pickle, or just, hey, does 12 gauge mean it's like fatter than 18 gauge, or just like that? And we're talking like early days, but they were nice enough to pass that information on to me. And if they hadn't, then maybe I wouldn't be where I was today. So I try to help other people that are just starting out as well. And I mean, I still have such a long way to go myself, but like I said, I'm in acceleration mode. And whenever I was asked to sit up here with these two, I was like, you want me up here with them? So yeah, it's important that we focus on sharing knowledge and advocating and educating, and also letting people know that there is not a one-size-fits-all way to do things. It literally, every single person could have, we could all three make the same thing, and it might look the exact same at the very end. Probably not, because I don't, but these two have leaps and bounds more experience than me. But the techniques used to make that piece, you learn those things on your own, no matter what. So, and I think it's important that people realize, there's not necessarily step A, step B, step C, C, and so on. It's just worth preserving trades in general.
And I saw Jill whisper at the end there. She said, there are no stupid questions. There are no stupid questions. They're just clarifications. We just want to make sure we're all on the same page, right? But you guys mentioned the importance of shopping with small businesses, and of course, women-owned businesses we're a big fan of here at Foundations of the West. I'll give each of you a chance in just a second to give everyone your information on how to follow along with y'all, especially, of course, ordering a custom piece at this point in the game's a little bit late, but we are in the Christmas and holiday season. We've got gifting on the mind. She said the next year, you can order now for the next year. And of course, there's always options of buying people gift cards to Silversmiths and letting them create their own custom piece with those makers. So let's go down the line here. Jill, I'll start with you. If you would give everyone your information, how to find you on social media, things like that.
So, to eat my own words, after making fun of the generation that doesn't like to be social, I am pretty much only found in two places. I do have a Facebook. I don't utilize it. I'm terrible with technology. I'm very sorry. You can find me on Instagram at The Classy Trailer, or you can email me at theclassytrailer@yahoo.com. And that's the extent. I don't have a TikTok or anything else.
But you do have a website.
Oh, I do have a website, and you can find those both linked. I can either email it to you if you email me, or it's a clickable link at the top of my Instagram. I manage that.
Perfect. I'm very proud of you. Katie?
I'm also a non-TikToker, Snapchat, any of those. I don't do those. Instagram, Facebook, I'm Kirshner Custom Silver on those. There is a link to my website, should be on both of them. If not, it's just my businessname.com, so KirshnerCustomSilver.com. And there are some things, no customs, but there are some things up there from my last show ready to ship for Christmas. So.
Okay, and Corsi?
I too am a non-TikToker. I actually don't even have Facebook. I don't have Snapchat. I only have Instagram and an email. My Instagram handle is at BuckWildBohemian. My website is buckwildbohemian.com, and my email is bwbcloset@gmail.com. Needs to change, I know. But if you see me around here, I've also got a handful of business cards, and I'd be happy to pass them out. And I don't do customs at all, but I have a ton of stuff on the site ready to ship. And as soon as I get home, I'm going to be working away for a couple weeks to make sure that I get stuff out in time for Christmas and have more of a variety to choose from as well, ready to ship.
Awesome. Ladies, thank you so much. Once again, we've got Jill. Yeah. She's, note the enthusiasm down there. Katie and Corsi, ladies, thank you so much for being a part of our first show here on Foundations of the West. You did an incredible job providing insight into the art of silversmithing, with which each of you put your own unique spins on. Everyone here today, let's give them a round of applause, and we will be back here where the women meet the West on Foundations of the West every day, 2 o'clock. Tomorrow's guests will be influencers in the Western fashion industry, so we've got a lot of fun things ahead. Once again, let's give these ladies a round of applause. We'll see you all tomorrow.